Well, how are you, Doc? How you been?
Why don't you go back where you came from?
Well, what happened to you? Somebody pulled you through a knothole?
Gunsmoke wasn't just a hit. It was the show that ruled TV for 20 years. With Marshal Matt Dillon at the center, it gave viewers drama, grit, and unforgettable stories. But even the best shows have their slip-ups, and one scene from Gunsmoke is now going viral for all the wrong reasons. It's a blooper that somehow made it through editing, and once you spot it, you can't unsee it. But that's not the only hidden moment from the show's long run. There's more behind-the-scenes drama and funny goofs than you might expect. Join us as we look back at the glory of Gunsmoke and uncover the one scene that producers definitely missed. The show that changed westerns forever, Gunsmoke was the dramatization of the American epic legend of the West, our own Iliad and Odyssey, according to Cecil Smith of the Los Angeles Times. Gunsmoke started as a radio drama in 1952. It was set in Dodge City, Kansas during the 1870s, a time when the American West was still wild and dangerous. The main character was a lawman named Marshal Matt Dillon. On radio, he was voiced by William Conrad. Later, when the show moved to television, James Arness took over the role. The radio version lasted from 1952 to 1961 and became a favorite among fans of radio dramas, even though it had no sponsors in the beginning. CBS believed in it and kept it going. Many people still say Gunsmoke was one of the best radio shows ever made. In 1955, Gunsmoke became a TV show. It aired on CBS and stayed on air for 20 years. The first episodes were only 30 minutes long, but in 1961 the format changed to 1 hour, which helped the show dive deeper into stories and characters. Over the years, it aired a total of 635 episodes, making it the longest-running scripted American primetime series until The Simpsons broke the record later. But back in its day, Gunsmoke was unbeatable. In fact, during its second TV season in 1956, it made it to the top 10 shows in the U.S., and from 1957 to 1961, it was number 1. Viewers loved the action, the drama, and the way it told stories about the Old West. But there was more to the show than just gunfights and bad guys. Life in Dodge City. The story of Gunsmoke took place in Dodge City, Kansas, right after the Civil War. The town was full of people starting new lives, chasing dreams, and sometimes causing trouble. At the center of it all was Marshal Matt Dillon, whose job was to keep peace in a place where danger was always close. Dillon wasn't alone. He had help from his deputies. First came Chester Good, and later Festus Hagen. Both were loyal but often unsure when Matt wasn't around. Then there was Doc Adams, the town's physician, smart and caring, though his old-school methods annoyed some patients. And of course, there was Miss Kitty Russell, the saloon owner. Even though she and Dillon were never shown as lovers, their bond was strong and clear. Most episodes of Gunsmoke showed trouble coming to Dodge from the outside. Sometimes Matt had to leave town, and the deputies had to manage on their own. These moments added tension and showed how much Dodge City relied on Matt Dillon. The show was not just serious, it had moments of humor too. Doc, Festus, and Chester often added light moments to balance the drama. That mix made Gunsmoke feel real, like a full world, not just a TV set. From short stories to a full epic, in its early years, Gunsmoke aired half-hour episodes. When these older episodes were rerun later, they were called Marshal Dillon. In the UK, the show aired under a different name, Gun Law. When it changed to 1-hour episodes in 1961, the stories became even richer, with more time to explore what the characters felt and how they lived. That's one reason why the show lasted so long. It grew with its audience. And while other westerns came and went, Gunsmoke kept going. 30 different western shows aired during its run, but none survived like Gunsmoke did. In fact, by the late 1960s, CBS planned to cancel the show. It wasn't as popular as before. But the public had something to say. Fans were upset, even Congress heard about it. And Babe Paley, the wife of CBS President William Paley, personally asked her husband not to cancel Gunsmoke. To save it, CBS moved it to a different time slot, Mondays at 8 p.m. The move worked. The ratings went up again, and for a few more years, Gunsmoke was back in the top 10. It even outlasted other big westerns like Bonanza and Alias Smith and Jones, which ended in early 1973, but Gunsmoke kept riding on. The Final Days and A Silent Goodbye. Despite all its success, CBS finally decided to end Gunsmoke in 1975. But the way they did it surprised everyone. The producers and the cast didn't even know the show was ending. CBS didn't make a public announcement. There was no final goodbye, no special ending episode. Actor James Arness, who played Marshall Dillon, said, "We didn't do a final wrap-up show. We finished the 20th year. We all expected to go on for another season or 2 or 3. The network never told anybody they were thinking of canceling." Instead, the cast and crew read the news in the trade papers. After 20 seasons and 635 episodes, Gunsmoke was done, just like that. But still, the show had already made its mark. It won 15 Primetime Emmy Awards and stayed in the Nielsen Top 30 even in its final year. That's rare for any TV show, especially one that had been on air for 2 full decades. But the love didn't stop there. After the series ended, 5 made-for-TV movies were produced. They gave fans a little more time with the characters they had grown up with. Even now, people still talk about Gunsmoke. It was more than just a Western. It was a part of American TV history, with drama, humor, and life lessons all in one place. And with that kind of legacy, it's no surprise that sharp-eyed fans are still catching things today that slipped through editing, and one blooper scene in particular has everyone talking. The hidden side of Gunsmoke's long success. You see, Gunsmoke wasn't just any show, it was a true television legend. Running from 1955 to 1975, it became the second longest-running show in TV history. Audiences loved its thrilling stories, emotional characters, and the old Western charm. It introduced new stars while also giving big roles to older, experienced actors. Even today, fans still talk about it, and for good reason. With 635 episodes over 20 years, there are many stories behind the scenes that most people don't know. Even after all these years, the actors and crew still share details that can surprise longtime fans. From casting stories to on-set rules, the show had its fair share of secrets. One of the biggest reasons for the show's strong run was James Arness, who played Marshall Matt Dillon. He never left. While many actors quit shows because of other roles or personal problems, Arness stayed from start to finish. And not just as a background character, he led the show. Even when he had smaller parts in some episodes, he was always the main man. Only Kelsey Grammer played a single character in more episodes than Arness, but Grammer's earlier appearances were often short. Arness was front and center. John Wayne's Link and Miss Kitty's Secret. Some fans believe that the role of Matt Dillon was first offered to John Wayne, but that's not true. According to Charles Marquis Warren, who directed some episodes and knew Wayne personally, that was never the case. "John Wayne lived near me," he said, "and we met at his bar and sat around reviling television. He hated TV." Still, Wayne had a big influence. He recommended James Arness for the role, and that advice changed everything. Then there's Miss Kitty Russell, played by Amanda Blake. She owned the Long Branch Saloon and appeared in over 500 episodes. But there was a mystery around her character, especially in the original radio version. The show's creator Norman MacDonald once hinted at her real job, saying, "Kitty is just someone Matt has to visit every once in a while." That quote led Time magazine to say that she was obviously not selling chocolate bars. Fans always wondered about the bond between Kitty and Matt. Many hoped for a love story, but the two never shared one on screen. Amanda Blake once joked, she'd love Matt to say, "Kitty, let's buy a hunk of land and raise some beans and kids. But then we'd have I Love Lucy out west." James Aries agreed. "I think they felt that you could only go so far with it. If you have Matt and Kitty have an on-screen love affair, then you know they'd have to get married, and then you'd have a different show there. That's why their connection stayed quiet, but clear, always present, never fully shown. Their relationship added depth to the show without ever changing its core, but behind the scenes even more surprising stories were unfolding, ones that had nothing to do with romance, from injuries to catchphrases, stories you didn't hear." James Aries gave a lot to Gunsmoke, more than just time before his acting career. He served in World War II in 1944 during the Battle of Anzio in Italy. He was shot by machine gun fire in his lower right leg and foot. He earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, but the injury stayed with him for life. It also affected how the show was filmed. His walking scenes had to be shot early in the morning when the pain was least. Despite the pain, Aries kept going. His loyalty to the show helped to keep it steady. That kind of dedication is rare, especially over 2 decades. And then there's the show's influence on language. Ever hear someone say, "Get out of Dodge"? It means get out of here fast. That phrase became popular because of Gunsmoke in the 1960s and 1980s. Kids especially started using it, not knowing it came from a TV show. Dodge City wasn't just a place on Gunsmoke, it became a symbol of danger and escape. The cast of Gunsmoke was huge. It had 10 regulars, 7 recurring roles, and many guest stars. Actor Burt Reynolds even had a short run on the show playing Quinn Asper, a half-native character who wasn't allowed to drink and dodge. Reynolds later became a major Hollywood star, but for a while he was just another face in Dodge City. Gunsmoke didn't just rule the screen, it had power off-screen too. Gunsmoke's power behind the curtain. CBS president William Paley wasn't a big fan of the show Gilligan's Island. He couldn't see how a story about people stuck on an island could stay popular, but the show pulled good ratings, so he let it continue. That is, until Gunsmoke was at risk in 1967. Gunsmoke was close to being cancelled. It wasn't doing well, and CBS needed the time slot. Gilligan's Island had the 8 p.m. spot, and it was holding strong, but Paley was a huge fan of Gunsmoke, and he made a personal choice. He pulled Gilligan's Island off the air and gave the slot to Gunsmoke instead. Just like that, the Western drama got a second wind, and it stayed on for 8 more years. That one decision changed the future of both shows. Gilligan's Island ended, but Gunsmoke kept going strong. It's a rare example of one show saving itself by simply having the right fan in the right place of power. All of this goes to show that Gunsmoke wasn't just a TV show, it was a movement, a piece of American culture that kept fighting to stay on air thanks to its cast, its fans, and a few bold decisions, behind-the-scenes star cameos, and surprise connections. Over the years, Gunsmoke welcomed many famous faces. Some of them were already stars, others became household names later. One of the most surprising facts: several Star Trek actors appeared on the show. William Shatner, known as Captain Kirk, played a role in the episode Quaker Girl. Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock, also appeared more than once between 1961 and 1966. DeForest Kelly Bones from Star Trek showed up in an episode called Indian Scout. Even James Dan, the man who played Scotty, appeared in Quint Asper Comes Home, but the crossovers didn't stop there. Actors from the Brady Bunch also appeared on Gunsmoke. Christopher Knight, who played Peter Brady, was in The Miracle Man in season 14. Eve Plum Jan Brady played Sue in Goldtown that same season, and Susan Olsen, better known as Cindy Brady, appeared in 2 different episodes during seasons 14 and 15. These weren't the only big-name cameos either. Charles Bronson, who later became known for playing tough guys, first showed up as a villain named KGO in The Killer. He even returned later to play the same character again. David Carradine, the martial arts star from Kung Fu, showed up as a horse thief. And if that wasn't enough, Naked Gun actor Leslie Nielsen played a gang leader. Other future stars like Nick Nolte, Dennis Hopper, Kurt Russell, Richard Dreyfuss, Sam Elliott, and even Harrison Ford also made appearances. It's amazing how many Hollywood legends passed through Dodge City before hitting it big, but the show's endings weren't always as grand as its guest list. A sudden end and a record number of showdowns. After 20 years of steady storytelling, many fans expected Gunsmoke to end with a proper goodbye, but that never happened. CBS can led the show without warning. James Aries later said, "We didn't do a final wrap-up show. We finished the 20th year. We all expected to go on for another season. There were no goodbyes on screen and no final message to the audience. Still, the cast and crew got a second chance. They came back for 5 made-for-TV movies. It wasn't quite the same, but it gave fans a bit more time with their favorite characters during its long run. Gunsmoke had a lot of gunfights. According to Marshall Trimble, a well-known Wild West historian, Matt Dillon shot 407 people across the TV series and the follow-up movies. Some of those people survived, but most didn't. The final on-screen death in the last episode was played by none other than Gary Busey. His character died from a brain tumor, marking the show's last dramatic moment. But before Arns was ever cast, producers looked at many actors for the role of Matt Dillon. In fact, they considered 26 final candidates. One of them was William Conrad, who had already played a U.S. Marshal on radio in the end. James Aries got the part thanks in part to a recommendation from John Wayne, and the rest, as they say, is history. Even though Gunsmoke ended in 1975, it stayed in the spotlight for decades. It held the record for the most episodes of any scripted primetime show. That record wasn't broken until 2020, when The Simpsons finally aired its 673rd episode, Changing Times, and public pressure. In the early years of Gunsmoke, the opening credits featured a gunfight. Week after week, viewers would see Matt Dillon draw his gun. It was action-packed and dramatic, but not everyone loved it. As the Vietnam War dragged on and protests grew, public attitudes toward violence began to shift. People started to question whether it was okay to show gunfights every week on TV. Because of this, the creators made a change. They removed the gunfight from the opening and used a new, less violent intro. The change showed how even a strong show like Gunsmoke had to adjust to the mood of the country, and changes didn't stop there. James Aries, already known for his towering height, he stood 6 feet 7 inches and began to suffer from arthritis. This started to affect his ability to shoot scenes over multiple days. To help him, the production team began filming all of his scenes in a single day. That way he could rest instead of working for long hours over several days. Even cigarette ads were part of the Gunsmoke world. In its first 7 seasons, the show was sponsored by L&M cigarettes. James Aries's face even appeared in ads telling viewers to watch L&M's Gunsmoke each week on CBS TV. Back then tobacco ads were everywhere, even near schools. Some doctors even appeared in commercials. But in 1970, the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act banned all cigarette ads from TV. That marked the end of L&M sponsorship and the start of a new era in television, from radio beginnings to TV history. Before Gunsmoke ever aired on television, it was already a hit on the radio back in the early days of CBS, when radio shows were more common than TV. William Paley, the same man who helped to keep Gunsmoke alive on TV, was in charge. He wanted a western for adults, not kids. Other shows like The Lone Ranger were fun, but they were made for younger audiences. Paley wanted something more serious, so CBS created the Gunsmoke radio program. It had a darker tone and focused more on grown-up themes. Many of the stories were intense and emotional. When the show later moved to television, some of the original radio actors tried out for the same roles, but none were chosen. The producers wanted fresh faces for the screen. Still, one voice stayed with the show writer John Meston. He had written many of the early radio episodes. When the show moved to TV, he rewrote those same scripts and turned them into the classic episodes we know today. That smooth transition from radio to television wasn't easy, but it helped Gunsmoke build a strong foundation, and that foundation carried the show through 2 decades of change, growth, and unforgettable storytelling. That strong start was just the beginning. As the years rolled on, the cast grew, changed, and brought even more heart to Dodge City. Behind the faces of Dodge City, Ken Curtis wasn't always Festus Hagen. In fact, during the early days of Gunsmoke, he played other small roles. One of them was a cattleman who didn't make it past the episode. But in Season 8, Episode 13, Curtis introduced viewers to Festus Hagen, a role that would later become a fan favorite. Festus was funny, loyal, and full of personality. The character was actually based on someone from Curtis's childhood named Cedar Jack. A man who made cedar fence posts. Glenn Strange, who played bartender Sam Noonan, also had a surprising background. Before his time in Dodge, he was better known as Frankenstein's monster in 3 Universal films. After Boris Karloff stepped down, he even brought humor to the monster role in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948. Still, Gunsmoke became the last project of his long career. Strange passed away in 1973 from lung cancer, but Glenn Strange left behind more than just TV credits. His co-star and friend Buck Taylor honored him in a deeply personal way. Taylor named his 3rd son after Glenn, showing just how much love and respect the cast had for each other. Even off-screen, Dennis Weaver, who played Chester Good, also had an interesting start. When he first auditioned, he thought he was reading for the lead role of Matt Dillon. Weaver later said, "I stuck my head back in a room and said, 'Are you sure you didn't want me to read for Matt Dillon?' He thought the Chester role was silly, but the producers already had him in mind. On his second try, he used a new accent, and that sealed the deal. Regrets, changes, and secrets that shaped the show. Once Weaver accepted the role of Chester, things moved quickly, but during tryouts for Matt Dillon, a new problem popped up. Dennis Weaver was so charming on screen that he started to look like the lead. To fix this, the team asked him to give Chester a physical quirk. Weaver went home, practiced a limp in his backyard, and brought it to the screen. It worked, but it also became something he regretted. That limp stayed with him through every episode. Gunsmoke had to evolve over time. It lasted through major changes in American culture, from the early days of black and white television to color, and from the calm 1950s to the changing 1960s and 70s. The show found ways to survive that included adapting to viewer expectations, competition from other shows, and even war protests. It also managed to return in the 1990s through 5 made-for-TV movies, showing just how strong the fan base remained. Even major characters weren't fully developed right away. Doc Adams, played by Milburn Stone, didn't have a first name for 16 years. He had a rich backstory. He studied medicine in Philadelphia, worked for riverboat gamblers, and even knew Mark Twain. Still, the writers never gave him a proper first name. Finally, they let Stone choose it himself. He picked Galen, a name that stuck. Amanda Blake, who played Miss Kitty Russell, was part of the show for 19 years. She got the role because she chased it hard. When she heard Gunsmoke was going from radio to TV, she wanted in. She said shounded the producers until they gave her the part, but she left before the final season. One big reason was the death of her friend Glenn Strange, the man behind the bar at her saloon. Speaking of which, Gunsmoke didn't just win hearts, it won awards. 2 awards, missed opportunities. And the woman who said no, the writing, acting, and overall production, earned the show plenty of recognition. The cast, including well-known names like Hank Miller and Burt Reynolds, helped the show get 15 Primetime Emmy nominations and 4 Golden Globe nods. On top of that, Gunsmoke won 2 TV Land Awards and 2 Western Heritage Awards. Writers from the show were also praised by the Writers Guild of America, the Western Writers of America, and Entertainment Weekly. But even in big successes, there are what ifs. Amanda Blake may have become the face of Miss Kitty, but she wasn't the first choice. That honor went to actress Polly Bond, the wife of Little Rascals actor Tommy Bond. She was offered the role, but turned it down. Why? Because she would have made more money than her husband with their marriage already going through a rough patch. Polly didn't want to add more pressure. In the end, she said no, and Amanda Blake stepped in. Sometimes the stars of a popular show get their own spin-offs. Gunsmoke only had one in 1971. Producers introduced a character named Sally Fergus in a 2-part episode. Sally was a 62-year-old tobacco-chewing tough woman who looked after a wounded gunfighter. Viewers liked her, so they gave her a show called Dirty Sally in 1974. But it only lasted one season. Still, lead actress Jeanette Nolan earned a Primetime Emmy nomination for her role The Little Things That Made a Big Difference. Festus Hagen's charm wasn't just in his voice or the way he walked, it came from real life. Ken Curtis based Festus on someone he knew growing up, Cedar Jack. He was a fence postmaker, and his rough but funny personality helped shape one of Gunsmoke's most beloved characters. Glenn Strange had a background in monster movies, but he became a fan favorite behind the saloon bar. After his passing in 1973, he was remembered with love by his fellow actors, especially Buck Taylor. That kind of connection shows just how close the cast really was. Doc didn't get a first name until season 16. Chester had to limp through every scene. Amanda Blake had to beg for her role, and Dennis Weaver almost read for the wrong part. These small things, some funny, some difficult, came together to build something lasting. The show went through every kind of change, black and white to color comedy to deep drama, short episodes to long ones. It even dealt with cast losses and cultural shifts, and through it all Gunsmoke stood tall. The show's strength didn't just come from scripts or set design, it came from the actors, the stories behind their characters, and the choices they made both on and off screen. A record-breaking legacy. Gunsmoke was more than just a western, it was a television giant. For many years, it held the title of the longest-running primetime live-action TV series in American history. The show lasted for 20 seasons, which no other show could beat, until 2019. That's when Law & Order Special Victims Unit started its 21st season and broke Gunsmoke's record. Before that, even the original Law & Order had tied the record, but then it was cancelled in 2010. It wasn't until 2022 that the original Law & Order came back with its 21st season too. In terms of scripted episodes, Gunsmoke stayed at the top for a long time. It had more episodes than any other American primetime commercial live-action show until The Simpsons passed it in 2018. That moment marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Still, Gunsmoke remains high in global rankings. As of 2016, it was the fourth longest-running prime time show in the world, behind Doctor Who. Taggart and the Bill. Which Gunsmoke character do you think had the biggest impact on the show's success, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.